I'm Father Tuck Grinnell. I'm pastor of St. Charles, and I want to welcome any of you who are, all three of the priests have projects that have been funded in part by the Gail Goodrich Legacy Funds. And but we want more of this evening just than to tell you about that. We want to tell you that there's hope, that there's a transformation happening, and where Africa seemed like the sick man of the world, that's not true. And you're going to hear why. Father Peter Henriot is a Jesuit who worked for many years in Washington, D.C. for the Center for Concern. He was the founder with the Jesuits and the bishops on development issues. After 17 or 18 years, he did the same for 17 or 18 years? A few years. 22 years in Zambia. And is currently living in Malawi, which is right next to it. So, is working on a funding project besides the development issues. Who here doesn't know Father Clement? Well, see, Father Clement, he's finishing, he will be, in 2 weeks, he will be Dr. Clement Aapengnuo. A doctorate in conflict resolution, and I think he knocked it out of the park. He also, well, the thing, you know, he's been involved not just here, but in Ghana before, and in many regional and district administrations in the 3 northern regions of Ghana. Father Innocent is a Jesuit, so is Father Peter, well respected for his work in conflict resolution. He is following Clem's path, but he's going to get his doctorate in 3 less years. Isn't that right, Innocent? He told us tonight at dinner. 3 less years. He's going to put his nose to the grindstone. He's living, he lived for 20 years as a Rwandan refugee in Tanzania, and that influenced, and of course the situation in Rwanda influenced his decision to get his degree in conflict resolution. So, without further ado, we begin with Father Pete.
Thank you very much, Father Tuck. Muligwanji? Oh, there's a few. I greet you in the local language in Malawi, Chichewa. As Father has very graciously introduced me, I'm a Jesuit, been working now for the past 25 years in Zambia and Malawi. And I'm really excited to be on this panel, particularly with the topic, you know, Africa, good news for the Church. I'm accustomed to speaking a long time, but we've been told we have 10 minutes each, so I'm punching my watch here. Basically, to speak of Africa, I always say, you know, that's a very difficult thing. Africa is a very huge place. Those of you who came in may have picked up the map. You know, you can put the United States of America, India, Western Europe, China, Argentina, and have space left over. Africa is huge. Some 1 billion people, 54 nations, tremendous varieties, and I've basically been concentrating in Zambia and Malawi, a little small portion. I've had a chance to travel in other parts to do some teaching, but basically what I would speak about when I speak about the hope and some of the future of Africa is what I'm experiencing, and that's why it's so good to have a panel that's a little bit wider ranging here. So I think the thing that I often do in a workshop is I say, I just come from Africa. What's your first image? You know, what comes across the TV or the newspaper? And the audience will say, oh, you know, war or genocide or hunger or something. I said, that's not Africa. And I said, you know, if you were an American and you came to Africa and said, I just came from the United States, what's your image of the United States? And people would say, well, that's why they go into schools and shoot people. And I said, that's not the United States. The negative images are not the reality. And I think that I've experienced that, and surely my 2 companions here have experienced it in many, many deeper ways. And that's what we want to just sort of lift up, not to get lost in the kind of distorted visions Africa is very big. Sometimes when I go back, visiting the United States, I'm going back and someone will say, well, you're in Africa, would you greet my friends in Nigeria? Well, you know, it's a little far from Nigeria to Zambia or Malawi or so. So that's the first thing when we talk about Africa, is to realize the vastness of it and the potential of that vastness. I work in Zambia and Malawi, the Jesuit province is that. I worked in development, justice and peace with a center there, and working with the Bishops' Conference and with the government on development issues. One of the big ones was canceling the debt of Zambia or so. But then I moved to Malawi a couple of years ago, where the Jesuits are beginning a new secondary school. Now, Zambia and Malawi are among the poorest countries in the world. The United Nations ranks countries according to, you know, health and life expectancy and literacy and basics like that. But they're countries at peace. There's no tribal conflicts. People live together, a variety of different tribes. And they're democratic countries. President rules, he loses, his party steps down, and the next party comes in. We're blessed in so many, many ways that way. Malawi has a woman president, the second woman president in Africa. So when I speak about some of the hopes, it's because of the potential that I experience, even in a very poor country. A tremendous potential. Potential in resources, lots of good resources in Zambia and Malawi, mining. In Malawi we have beautiful lake, we have agriculture, we have forestry, lots of things, but mostly we have people. And people that are eager to live together in peace and to move forward. And that's part of the great hope. Key to that, of course, what I would speak about is the recognition that, you know, we're in a situation of a Catholic Church that is very vibrant. Just to say some of the statistics, the fastest growing Catholic Church in the world is in Africa. The future of the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, is Africa. I mean, just listen. 1900, 2 million Catholics on the continent. 1975, 55 million. Today, 165 million. 43% of the world's adult baptisms take place in Africa. I've done several of them myself. Nearly half of the world's children in elementary schools live in Africa. More Catholic hospitals in Africa than in North and Central America combined. And since 1978, the number of African seminarians have more than quadrupled. Why? Why this religious sense? Some of the African theologians will say, well, and we could get the Africans to say this better than I could, there's an ontological or an existential religious spirit to the Africans. A belief in the external, internal, a belief in the spirit world, a belief in more than what we can see immediately or so, and a religious sensitivity. And that is experiencing greatly in terms of, I was in charge for 16 years when I was in Zambia of an outstation that was packed, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. Now, some of the people that I worked with, they're building even more, a bigger spot or so. That's a very encouraging thing. Now, of course, we want not just quantity, we want quality. Well, we have some quality. I'll just say a word about, we have a quality man here from Ghana, but another quality man is number 3 or 4 in the Vatican right now, Cardinal Turkson. He's head of the Justice and Peace Secretariat. And in 2009, I was together with him at a gathering, and there was a press conference, and one of the persons stood up and said, Cardinal, I have a couple of questions. Do you think there'll ever be a black, an African pope? And Cardinal Turkson said, why not? Next question. I think we'll see that. I think that's one of the big things to talk about in terms of the hope, the good news of the Catholic Church in Africa, is something, let me just give a sort of a title and call it inculturation. And that's the challenge to make sure that the Church in Africa is authentically Christian and genuinely African. Because in many ways, the Jesuit missionaries or other missionaries that came, mostly from Europe, came to introduce Christianity, to baptize, but to introduce people into a European church or so. There was a Eurocentric in the architecture and the liturgy and the prayer and the style of things. And today there's much more of a concern for making sure that it be genuinely Christian, but be genuinely African also. And of course, I think we're all helped in that in a very encouraging way by the man who said when he came out after being elected Pope, they had to go to the ends of the earth to find him. The church with Francis is no longer a Eurocentric church only. And Africa is part of that wider sense and part of that contribution then that it will make to the wider church in a very, very beautiful way. I think that, you know, it has implications in a variety of sorts of things that are part of this good news. There's a lot of good theology that's going on among African theologians, reflecting from their own traditions, reflecting from their own culture. For instance, you know, I say Jesus Christ is Savior. I believe that. Well, what would it mean to say that Jesus Christ is senior ancestor? That understanding of the role of the ancestors, and a senior who has that salvific possibility. That's a different kind of a language than I might use in an American situation or a European situation. Or to speak of the living dead. What does that mean? Well, we just had a feast of the All Saints, the Communion of Saints. So there's a whole theology that is adapting more to a cultural experience that does not deny the truths, but enriches the truths. And each of us can learn in that enrichment in a very powerful way. A part of that hope also is, you know, understanding the pastoral concern. What does it mean to say that all of the pastoral care and the organization of the church is according to Roman canon law? But the Chinese are not Roman. The Latin Americans are not Roman, and certainly the Africans are not Roman. I was living the first year in a village. I was working in a village project in Zambia, and one of the bishops there, he was an Irish bishop, rather quiet on a lot of things, but he said to me one time, you know, we are challenged here, just in a very practical pastoral way. You know, marriage is very, very important. But in canon law, Roman canon law, marriage is a blessing in the morning and a bedding at night, and then you're there forever. But here, marriage is a process. The couple must, first of all, there must be the lobola paid, or the bride price paid. It's not purchasing the bride, but it's a guaranteeing the two families are together, that they'll be supporting. And secondly, that there be no arguments, you know, the family be splitting up or something, or they'd be living together. And thirdly, that there be children. And when that process is complete, then that's a marriage. And he said, I wonder whether our Roman canon law can ever grasp that in some fashion or another. To experience the value, the beauty of permanent marriage may take different forms. That's enculturation in some sense. Certainly there's a very strong social commitment of the church in Africa. I'll just give you an example. I had the privilege of being part of the Second African Synod. This was a synod of bishops, about 200 bishops from around the world, 200 African bishops, not from around the world, just from Africa, gathered 2009 for discussion with Pope Benedict for 3 weeks on the theme, the Church in Africa in service of reconciliation, justice, and peace. I had the privilege to be part of the advisory group, and we sat there and listened to and wrote things exactly addressing the church to be alive with a faith in Jesus Christ that was manifested in the work of reconciliation, the work of peace, the work of justice, the work of development. It was a powerful experience, and that's a church that's alive very, very much strongly or so. You know, it isn't caught up in a lot of small kinds of issues that sometimes some churches get caught up in. But the Pope is trying to get us to get caught up in a wider church. And certainly that's the African church that I've experienced, and is good news. I think, obviously, so very, very important for all of this is the recognition of the importance of education, the realization of the potential. Where I live in Malawi, less than 35% of the young people go to secondary school. Less than 30% of the girls. We Jesuits said we will begin a secondary school there in Malawi. The description is there, and I'd be happy to talk about that. But it's basically, some people said, those of you who were at Mass may have heard me say, oh, you Jesuits, you'll have a private boys' school in the capital. No, it's in a poor rural area, 120 miles from the capital. It's a girls' and boys' school. It's coeducational from the start. the boarding school, and it cooperates with the government. So that means the government pays the teachers, right away the fees are lower. It's an option for the poor. It's an effort to make a difference in an area where less than 25% of the kids go to secondary school, less than 20% of the girls. We'll make that commitment particularly for the girls. You educate a girl, she'll marry later, she'll have fewer children, more of those children will live, she'll take a part in the community, and she'll be sure that her children are educated also. You build a future that way. So education is so very important, and I know we're going to hear it from my two friends here. I just conclude by saying what Benedict XVI said at the end of that gathering, the 3-week gathering that we had in Rome. He used an expression that was very powerful. He said, Africa represents an enormous spiritual lung for a humanity that appears to be in a crisis of faith and hope. A spiritual lung, a breathing, a spirit. Central to that spirit is something called Ubuntu. It's an African proverb. I am because we are, and we are because I am. I am, my dignity, my possibility, my future, because I belong to a community. And the community's richness and potential, because it's made up of people like me. I don't want to overly romanticize. It doesn't always work out in the practical, but it's the guiding principle. And how powerful that is for those of us who say in the Christian faith, we're made in the image and likeness of God. And who is our God? A Trinity, a community. And so what I see so strong in the good news from the Church of Africa, it can be good news much wider and spread in even a small way here tonight, is this potential of recognizing Jesus Christ, recognizing community of the Trinity, and recognizing the consequences for what it has in people's lives. And I'm very happy that you'll hear even more concretely those consequences in my brother's lives here. Thank you very much.
Where you think that, hey, 10, 15, 20 years from now, Africa is going to be in a different place, or the people here can have a bigger impact than they could, let's say, in other areas. Any particular areas stand out for you?
Someone asked me one time, if you had to say, what are some of the priorities in a country like Malawi? And I had no hesitancy in saying there are two priorities, education and agriculture. Education is linked to health also. And agriculture is going to be a future in so many different ways, in so strong ways or so. Now both of those have implications then for what's going on, say, in the United States or in Europe. Because there surely is need and assistance, and I want to also thank, I didn't say in my own talk, but our own school has received some help from the Gale Foundation Legacy or so. And so there are ways that can be helped, education to get it underway. So we're not completely dependent upon outside help, but that is one of the ways when education is talked about. All three of us have talked about the importance of that. But let me give another example of agriculture. Malawi has hooked itself into, because of the British plans, it was a British colony, into its main export earner is tobacco, and that is declining, of course. It has a tremendous potential in cotton, but it has no potential of entering the international market as long as the United States Congress subsidized cotton in the United States. So you see right away, there is one of the ways that you people help is by being tuned into what are some of the political and economic connections between Africa and the rest of the world that need to be paid attention to. And I would say that those are at least two sort of concrete ways. I often say, I think I said at Mass the other day, that we need to do it with our head, with our heart, and with our hands. With our head is to think and see these issues. There's all these problems in Africa. Why? What does it mean? The wars in Africa. Who are the 5 largest arms sellers in the world? The 5 permanent members of the Security Council to promote peace. Something. We must see what the structural issues are. Who is being supported? For what kind of trade links are they being supported or so? So to think. And then with the heart, the kind of a response, the feeling that can go out or so. And then with the hands, and some of those hands are political actions also. So I think there's plenty of ways of connections. And one of the exciting things of this parish is it's making that effort, not just in abstract ways or some funding, but a personal context that is very, very strong.
Yes, I think that St. Charles has got it right, you know. Just even the information, the fact that all of you are here this evening to listen to stories coming from Africa, for me is a good beginning. And in the 7 years that I've been in this parish, I've seen the prayers, the generosity, the sacrifice in time and talent to help. And I think that is important. What I would add is, I'd like to invite you to come and see, as Jesus said to the disciples, come and see where I'm living. Because I was talking with Tar, one of the things we said is, those of you who can make it, it'll be good to come and visit, because it's a life transforming experience. I met a group of people from Chicago. The youngest among them was about 70 years old, and I said, you people are brave. And one of the guys said, I've heard a lot about leprosy. I didn't believe that there were people in this world with leprosy until I saw one. And for him, that paid for the whole trip, and that has changed his life for good. So one aspect is also to get to know more about the continent, and if you can visit, why not? Because when you get there, you see that, oh wow, wait a minute, I think this continent has a lot to offer me. Thank you very much for this wonderful and broad exposition, and I'd like to thank all of you for the interest in Africa, and also for taking this evening to come around. Peter's kind of outlined broadly the situation in Africa. I like to focus where I know best, Ghana. And I begin by saying that I just came back from Ghana, where I had the opportunity to officiate at my brother's wedding. He's number 5, and he's the only one, because he was the one left, and it was wonderful. But something struck me there at the wedding. When we came out, I met all my cousins, you know, and none of my cousins have graduated from college, and many of them were really in a very miserable state. All my brothers came with their families, they came in their cars, and you could just see that they were well off. And it struck me, because only my mother in the family got to go to school out of 25 kids, and she was sent to school by her dad because she was a very naughty girl, so that they could punish her in school. So it struck me, you know, and when I saw my mother's joy at seeing all her children around and me officiating at this wedding, afterwards I looked at her and I said, it's because of you I'm committed to the girl child education. A few years ago, a decade ago, The Economist came out with a front page article that said, Africa, the hopeless continent. And there was a map of Africa with a guy holding a bazooka. You know, and it goes back to what Father has just said. You know, Africa is often considered a country, so if one country in Africa is in conflict, then the whole of Africa is in conflict. 10 years down the lane, a new article has come out saying, Africa, a rising continent. And I kind of agree with the analysis, because when I left Ghana, there were 3 flights a week from Accra to Tamale. Today, there are 5 flights a day from Accra to Tamale. Barely 6 years. Unfortunately, a lot of the success of Africa that is being presented is economic growth and investment opportunities. Peace and emerging stable democracies are some of the reasons for Africa rising. What is missing in most of the reports we see is the role of the faith-based institutions, and especially the role of the Catholic Church in ensuring that there is peace and that democracies are beginning to take place. In Ghana, the faith-based organizations today run 60% of the health and education services and most of the social services. The best schools are those schools that are run by the Catholic Church. I was privileged to go to a minor seminary that was set up by the Missionaries of Africa and I went on to the seminary. They were all missionaries. Today, the same minor seminary and the same seminary have African priests and religious there. 100 years ago, when the missionaries first came to my tribe, there was not a single person who was educated. And they started evangelization there with schools, with health, and of course the gospel. Today, as I speak, the missionary organization that came to the northwestern part of Ghana, the superior general of that organization today, that congregation comes from my tribe. So in the diocese of where I come from, we have about 75% Catholic. And I'm in the diocese of Damango, that is less than 5%, it's about 5% Catholic. So even within Ghana, we have become missionaries to other parts. But these stories never get told. Some of the best girls' institutions, for instance, in our area, St. Francis Girls was one of the first. And literally in the capital, any woman who is in a big position, a ministerial position, invariably from the Upper West comes from this school. Through the intervention of Gail's legacy and grant, I had the opportunity with Elise to go to Damango this time and to present a bus. I'm still editing the video, so I couldn't show it here. But just to see the girls break out in song and in joy, when they saw the bus, was just amazing. Now, when our diocese was created in 1995, women who are 50 and above, the illiteracy rate was 95%. So Bishop said, stop everything about the gospel, let's focus on girl child education and peace. Today, as I speak, one of those girls is an assistant lecturer at the Catholic University, graduated from St. Anne's. The other one is working with the Ministry of Local Government. The other one just finished her internship at the Ministry of Interior. For some of these girls, they are the first in the entire tribe to get a college degree. Now, those of you who have this sheet, if you look at the back of Africa, I put two sets of pictures. You see two African families, and then you see two African women. And I put on top there, the difference in these pictures is education. Now, the other thing that often is not underlined is interreligious dialogue and peace building. You see, the church in Africa, in many parts of Africa, at least in Ghana, is nothing compared to the church in the US. The church is like a lifesaver for many of the places. Sometimes when I listen to criticisms about the Catholic Church in this country, I'm like, is it the same church or is it a different church? Interreligious dialogue, very, very important. The Catholic Bishops' Conference, the Christian Council of Ghana, the Council of Pentecostal Churches have every year a joint annual meeting. And they usually come out with a paper on national issues. And sometimes when there are very serious national issues, they join hands with the Islamic Council to make these pronouncements. And that's one of the things that you find in Africa, that you have bishops working with Islamic leaders, and there is no problem. You can find a family, the father is Muslim, the wife is Catholic, and the three children belong to three different religions. And they come home in the evening, there's peace in the house, they eat together, no problem. So at the Episcopal level, there is this kind of interreligious dialogue, there is this collaboration to address national issues. Because of the church's role in education, a lot of the top people are Catholics. And many of them, in their own way, bring their faith to bear in the work that they do. When our diocese was created, apart from the girl child education, we also discovered that in the northern part of Ghana, we had some inter-ethnic conflicts. So my bishop said, why don't we begin an institute that teaches people how to live in peace? And I was tasked to do that. When we started, people were like, you people are crazy, how can you teach peace? 2 years into the program, I will bring people into the room like this. This group doesn't want to look at that group. After 3 days, they are embracing each other and talking and laughing. Because we create the environment for them to suddenly recognize that the enemy is also a human being. After 6 years, today we have the National Peace Council in Ghana, and Cardinal Texan was the chairman of that council. And the constitution in Ghana devotes a budget annually for this. But peace building started with the Catholic Church. These things, they usually are not reported. So I'm going back at the end of December, and I'm going to go back to this peace center, and I'm really looking forward to take it up another notch. The Catholic Church has truly brought salvation to Ghana in particular, and the continent of Africa in general, in the areas of integral development of the human person, as we mentioned, social services, education, health, but also religious, cultural, social, economic, and political development. We started a program where we started training women politicians. In most of the local districts today, majority of the assembly persons are women. These programs are often run by the church. The church in Ghana and the continent of Africa is also responding to the gospel by internalizing it and sharing it. And as you heard from the statistics, many people are coming to the faith. But we also have our skeptics. I remember the first African Synod 1994, where people suddenly realized the church was growing in Africa. They said, oh, you know what? The priests are allowed to marry, and the Catholics can marry 2 wives. So it's kind of a laissez-faire thing. That's why the church is growing there. But truly, no, I don't know about that. Actually, I visited a bishop friend of mine in Connecticut, and the day I arrived, the priest asked me this question. I took my time and I answered the question. And then the bishop invited me and asked me the same question. Actually, I said some things to him that I cannot say here. And we walked together for 5 minutes in silence, and then, I must give him credit. He apologized. And I said, yesterday I was asked the same question. You're the bishop of the Catholic Church. Have they changed the canon law? If not, why are you asking me these questions? So the faith is being internalized, and it's also being shared, because you'll find African missionaries all over the world. We're seeing a rise in the Catholic population. The challenge for us is, how do we keep this going so that we can deepen the faith and also expand? What we have, we can also share with the world. And that is why what we are doing here today is very important. Creating the awareness, but above all, for me at the end of the day, as one of the TED series lectures said, if Africa is to take its place in the coming century, it has to come through education. And we always say in Ghana, you educate a man, you educate an individual, you educate a woman, you educate a whole nation. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the St. Charles community for all your support for Africa, and especially I see the sister of Gail here, to say a big thank you. I'll be sending you a video of some of the activities there. And to all of you here, last year and this year alone, we raised over 100,000 from this parish alone to be able to help in my diocese. So now when I go back home, I'm going to be king. I'm going to say, remember St. Charles, get me a decent place to stay. I'll leave it at this in case you have some more questions.
But I know that Father Clem was invited to the Pentagon at some stage, and he was invited to talk, I believe, about AFRICOM. And I'm interested in us examining our policies, which is something that Gail did a lot. She questioned the policies of her own organization to move them toward self-reliance, toward empowerment, economic development of the lives of women as the solution to some of the sexual issues. But I think all of us need to start questioning where we're going as a country. I know that Bobby Kennedy in South Africa and his solidarity with human rights and all of that made a huge difference. But what kind of political and ecclesiastical leadership do we have in this country right now, where the focus is on terror, and Africa is seen as a hotbed for terrorism that we need to protect ourselves to? We used to have a military-industrial complex. Now we have a military-industrial and security or intelligence complex. And the focus on Africa is how can we protect ourselves from the development of new forms of terrorism in Africa. And AFRICOM is part of the solution to it. They couldn't base it in Africa, I believe it's now based in Italy. But all that development is happening under our feet here in stone's throw from the Pentagon. And I think we should question our military and economic strategies as a country, because after all, there's only so much we can do with the tide. What more can we do with our taxes? I'll give you to the expert who was invited to the Pentagon to explain how this happened.
You haven't learned how to stay out of trouble, have you? Well, my experience there was interesting. Basically, I told them they have an army for a war that doesn't exist. And I was amazed when those generals and colonels looked at me and said, so what do we do? You know. So I think that in the Pentagon they've been taken unawares, you know, and you know, the kind of terrorism we're experiencing today makes the structures, the military structures and systems we have irrelevant. The challenge is, do we have the courage to admit that and then say what other alternatives do we have, you know, and there are ways of doing it. And I think that the African governments did very well when they stood up to basing AFRICOM in Africa. The second positive thing is that I think the Chinese are leading the way. They are challenging the American businesses, you know, because China, even if China is not flexing its military muscle, it's flexing its economic muscle. And I think America is beginning to come around because the Chinese are all over the place. They've just built a brand new headquarters for OAU. I went to Ghana, I mean, a journey of 700 miles. I saw only about 10 miles of rough road, and most of the construction is done by the Chinese companies. So we have to begin to re-strategize, or else it's not going to help us. You know, that's all I can say.
Let me just say a word about the Chinese, because they are a very, very strong presence in both in Zambia and in Malawi, and it's a mixed presence. It's a presence that, say, just to speak in Malawi, is heavy on infrastructure, roads, hotels, conference centers, stadiums, not health and education. They're big in that. And they also, they come in, the previous president, before the woman president, said he liked very much the Chinese because they don't ask questions. You know, the United States or Britain or the Netherlands will ask questions about human rights or something or other like that. The Chinese are a strong economic presence for a strong political reason. A strong economic presence for benefiting their own people. As the standard of living increases within China, they need more meat, they need more grains, etc., and that's why in Ethiopia or in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have vast amounts of land in exchange for a railroad or a road or something like that. But the food grown there goes to China or so. And secondly, the votes that they need in the United Nations on certain occasions. Let me just give a concrete example I felt sorry about. The new president of China was elected just 6-8 months ago. His first trip was to 10 African countries, assuring them of the cooperation, economic support, political support where necessary, etc. President Obama came in a very swift visit to 3 countries, just touching base like that. So I think we're missing the point. And it's not just enough to say, oh, well, the Chinese should beware of them, criticize them. What are we doing positively?
Sounds really positive, though, for the African continent, that China would want to come and invest in them and make...
It's mixed. It's mixed. What is the influence? What are the benefits, by and large, for the Chinese? For the Ethiopians, for instance, vast amounts of land where food is being produced, but is not feeding the Ethiopians. So it's a mix. It's a mix.
They had more power in what they were doing there. Okay.
Well, how do we keep it going? That's a question that he ended up with. And during the introduction, Sarataki did say he doesn't want us to just come and work and listen, but he wants us to be transformed. And I guess that's why I'm standing here, speaking for African women. And I think, to respond to your question, so how do we keep this together? It's just African women should keep all together. So that's the part that I'm addressing. Looking at Africa and saying, Africa, good news for the church. I took a lot of time to think about it. Africa is just a good news for the church. And I was saying, what does it mean exactly to me? I'm the church. Not by the virtue of being a priest, but by the virtue of being a Christian, I'm the church. So what does Africa become a good news? So probably I end up speaking more about myself than Africa, or more about myself than the church. So where does the woman stand, African woman stand in this good news? Father Peter did mention the African famous philosophy, which is, I am because you are, and since you are, therefore I am. And I think as I was reflecting, and I'm not all that young, I've been in this world for a while now, there's no anybody in Africa who embraces this philosophy as African woman. There's nobody who embraces this philosophy as African woman. So she's a unity, if you want. She's the glue that unites the African family together, unites African society together. So if we are looking for the good news, somebody who embeds this philosophy, deep philosophy of humanism, it's African woman. And so what does African woman also bring to the church as the good news? I thought that African woman somehow, she's have a Protestant pastor who challenges me that normally Catholics we do not read the Bible. And I was thinking through, I remembered James, the letter of James chapter 2:26. Faith without work is dead. And I was saying, maybe one of the gifts, one of the good news that African woman is bringing to us, it's the gift of bringing faith and action. So the faith of African woman is not dry. When you have 5 to 7 children or 8, in my family we are 8, we have very few claim they're about 25. And you have to get time to take all these kids to school and to the church and feed them. There's nobody who would embrace faith and action than African woman in the African continent. And I think that's a good news for us. Me as a priest, and listening carefully to what the Pope recently offered, Pope Francis, saying, the shepherds have to smell like their sheep. So literally, I did call my mother today. I called 2 people, telling them about this talk back home. One is my mother, another one is my pastor. And so my mother said, this is what I'm going to speak about, African woman, and so what do you want me to tell the audience? She said, I think you are smarter than me, so you know what to say. I said, no, I don't know. I'll be speaking about a woman and I'm not a woman. And she says, tell them that I'm praying for them. I'm praying for them. Praying for them. And so that pushed me a little bit back. So when we disconnected, I called my pastor. I said, I'll be offering this conversation tonight. So what do I want to say to these wonderful people? He says, tell them they're welcome to my parish. They can come anytime they want. They can stay over. And that's it. So the Pope is saying, the shepherds should smell like sheep. And so if I'm a priest, by the virtue of the definition of Catholic Church, so I'm a pastor, I'm a shepherd, and so I should smell like an African woman. So if I smell differently, then I don't qualify to be a shepherd to this woman. So how does the African woman smell? How does the African woman smell? So a few things that I just caught my 5 senses. One is poverty. I think it has already been mentioned. So when anybody thinks of African woman, most of the time, you think about poverty, about ignorance, So when you think of African women, if majority of Africans are women, if we have 1 billion population, so that means over 500 million are women, so who are likely to be the majority of uneducated? So women. How about the diseases? This is how African women smell, so I should smell like an African woman. How about the wars and the miserable violence that the African woman goes through? So if I'm a shepherd, how do I smell like this woman? So what becomes a good news for me? What becomes a good news for her? So that carries me to the third part of my conversation. And probably before I go to the third part, during the introduction, Father Taki did mention that I was born as a refugee. And globally now we have about 46 million displaced people and refugees. And I think African population makes 7 of the global population. And yet when you come to the refugees, quarter of the entire population of refugees are African, including myself a few years ago. And who are most victim of this, if it's not African woman? Who fights all these wars? The children of African women. Who takes care of babies in the refugee camps? It's African woman. And most of the time, my experience, it will be only African women who will be standing in the refugee camps. Most of the men will be depressed because they have been rendered useless by war. They can't provide for their families, so they're just depressed. So a woman will be forced to take care of her own babies, but also take care of her husband because he's depressed. He can't play his role as a husband anymore. So how do I smell like this African woman? So this takes me to the third part, which is a little bit smelling nice. That's the hope. The hope for the African woman. I feel that the African woman, one of the things that she really gives me and gives the continent as a good news and gives the church is the gift of accompaniment. So this tough woman, she invites the church to journey with her, to accompany her. Say, come and journey with me through all this. And I think Clem and Peter have beautifully presented on that. Our church has been so instrumental accompanying this woman. So where we tend to forget, somehow the Pope has reminded us that actually we should continue to accompany her and enjoy journeying with her. And she has proved that if we accompany her, we don't need to speak on her behalf. She'll speak by herself. And I think that's what Clem presented with Father Peter. And I have a concrete example from Rwanda just 10, 15 years ago. We had about 7-8% women in parliament. And so the government decided to change the law and said, henceforth, this is 2003, the number of parliamentarians would have to respect gender at least minimally 30%. And so that really did a good job for the women to come in. And today, as I speak, we have 64% parliamentarians in Rwanda are women. But that didn't come from the air. The church runs more than 60% of the schools. And these women are educated, they can compete. And they have been trusted. And so men are shaken. Men, now they can't pass any policies if they don't have a backup of women. You have Malawi, where Peter comes from. We have the second African president woman, Joyce. Can't we have more? We can. We have 54 countries, so we can have more. The Liberian woman, Helen Johnson, who stood so strong after the deadly war, she's now leading Liberia. We have Mrs. Zuma in African Union. Now the African Union, the president of African Union is a woman. How about that? So there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope for African women. And I'm happy to journey her and we journey with her and accompany her. The second hope that I see in Africa and a woman as a good news to the church and to the continent is that the African woman offers me a space to be extraordinary. So I'm a just ordinary guy, but the African woman offers me an opportunity to become extraordinary. And what does it mean by this? I'm sure if you go to Malawi and ask them about the pillar, they say, oh, he's our saint. He's building a school for us. He's an extraordinary man. If you go to Ghana and ask, this is what Clem ended up with, say, when I go back, they know I have brought in this money to build a school. I'm an extraordinary person. When I went back to Rwanda, during summer to work with the women, I come to that a little bit. And now, whenever I make a phone call to them, they are, oh gosh, Father, so when are you returning? So I have been made extraordinary when I'm just ordinary. 2 weeks ago, I was in this room, I witnessed the Elise who accompanied for the Clem to Ghana, did her presentation, and she said, one of the girls said, you are my hero, you are my mentor. I want to become like you when I grow up. I want to become like you when I grow up. So women in Africa are offering us opportunity to be extraordinary actually when we are ordinary. The third hope that I see in African woman is a good news. Is that she's inviting me to restore God's beauty. So the Genesis, I would challenge my Protestant pastor that Catholics will read the Bible. So Genesis 1:31. So after God created everything, he saw that it was beautiful, including African woman. So me as a church, I feel happy that the African woman is inviting me to restore that beauty. The beauty that God created. So she invites me in that space. So the little energy I put in that, the little resources I put in that, comes to restore that beauty that God created, and he saw that it was good. So that becomes spiritual, it becomes the best for me. So I'm not praying for the sake of praying and contemplating, but I'm praying to work, and I'm working to pray to accompany this woman who is inviting me to this beautiful space. So if I can't love this woman, how do I love God whom I don't see if I can't love this woman whom I see each day, whom I smell, whom I taste, whom I see with my own eyes, whom I touch? How would I say, God, you know, God, I love you so much in my prayer if I can't love this woman? So she offers me opportunity actually to actualize the letter of St. John, chapter 4, verse 19 to 21. If I can't love this woman, how do I claim that I love God? How do I dare to claim that? So as I come to an end, I'd like to acknowledge, and especially the sister of Gail. She has made us so proud, and I'm sure wherever she's in heaven now, she's smiling. Women in Rwanda are smiling, about 110 women whom I worked with during summer, committing themselves to leave prostitution to try and embrace a new life. They are smiling. The girls in Ghana, they are smiling. The girls and the boys in Malawi, they are smiling. So the woman in Africa, she's offering us this space in time to join your sister here on earth, not yet in heaven. She's privileged to be there. But she's inviting us to participate in that joy. So sharing that beauty and that joy of making other people happy. As Mother Teresa says, we're made for each other. So African woman is a good news because she allows us to touch each other and be touched. So finally, let me conclude with what Pope Francis says recently. He said, the church cannot be herself without the woman and her role. The woman is essential for the church, and her femininity, genius, is needed in every decision and the policy we make. So African woman is a good news for us. Thank you.